Welcome back to Wealth Mavericks, the podcast where we help doctors unlock the secrets to building generational wealth. And today, we're talking about how to make time slow down.
Doing new things, it's like it creates these new neural pathways. And I just think so few people, as we get older, it is so easy to fall into a routine.
Don't live the same year every year and call it a life. Make each one different. Welcome back to the podcast and Happy New Year. I'm joined today by Joe, and it's our first Wealth Mavericks episode of 2026. So how many of you have said in the past few weeks or months, wow, that year just went so fast? If you have, you are far from alone. We all feel that way, don't we? That life is just passing us by at an increasingly rapid rate, and we're not quite sure why. There is a reason for it, and Joe and I are going to share today why and how to slow it down, even just a little bit. So, Joe, do you feel like as you've gotten older, especially maybe in the last few years, that time is just racing by?
Totally. And I feel like this is like the central theme of so many conversations that I have too. And it's always like at the end of the year, I'm like, didn't it just turn 2025? Like, what are we doing? We're switching it over again. I actually have a theory on this, and then I do want to get into the study because I thought there were some really interesting elements behind that. But I think there is some natural byproduct of this. When you're 1 year old, 1 year is 100% of your life. When you're 2, 1 year is 50% of your life. When you're 50, a year is only 1/50th of your life. So I could see how there just could be some natural progression where it feels like time is, speeding up because of that effect. But my sister and I were having this conversation. I was flying to Dallas to our headquarters and have some time with Bob. And so I called her on the way to the airport, and we were talking about this very topic. And it was just like, it's almost like we're in a simulation or something. Like something's going on, something funky. It's like you lay your head on the pillow at night and you're like, a whole day went by? Like, what was that? That was not 24 hours. And literally I saw a post with this Harvard study that I want to read. Should I just read it for everybody?
Yeah.
So this is like the snippet from the Harvard study. But it says a Harvard neurologist showed his patients brain scans in the lab and said something everyone wishes weren't true. After 30 years, your brain stops recording new things. It just replays old tapes, which is, I think really, really common. When one day looks exactly like the day before, neurons don't bother hitting record because it just wastes energy. When you were young, every moment was new, which made time feel slower. Now everything repeats like a show you've already watched. One of his patients complained, I've lived 40 years, but I only remember a few months of real life. And the neurologist showed him scans where the hippocampus barely lit up because routine had taken over his days. And it goes on and talks about a lot, but really what they're saying is the antivenom to this is doing new things. It's like it creates these new neural pathways. And I just think so few people, as we get older, it is so easy to fall into a routine. And I think the natural progression for most of us is, gaining momentum in our careers. And then you kind of settle into, I'll call it a healthy plateau, where you're adding the maximum value you can to the world. And therefore, you're kind of doing the same thing over and over and over, because that's the thing that produces the most value. So I think it's just kind of a natural progression for us to go through life, get into that seam or that routine where just nothing is new anymore. And that, I think, spills over into our marriages, into our relationships with our kids. And it's just kind of the same thing over and over. So I feel like we have to actively combat that, in order for time to slow down.
So what kinds of things do you suggest that people do to shake things up? Or what are some of the things you've done to create new memories?
I'm not going to I don't want to be braggadocious or anything, but I love doing new things. So a couple years ago, I started skydiving. I built a car with my son. My wife and I are try to be fairly intentional about picking new things that we want to do each year. I know you've got some thoughts around this, kind of like making it a central theme for your year, but that's really, I think, what I have done, because I am naturally a very freedom oriented creature. And so I want to find new things. Like routine feels like being locked into a cage. So I think
Mhm.
my natural rhythm would be to fight back against that. Um, Obviously you don't have to go skydiving, but if you're in Denver and you want to go skydiving, hit me up and we'll go together.
And I think some people are very averse to change. A lot of people are, because it's like how we're programmed. Change is scary and it makes us feel unsafe, I think sometimes.
Mhm.
But then there are some of us who are just more wired to embrace change and enjoy it. Like Dave and I just had this conversation last night out on a walk in a different neighborhood, looking at Christmas lights and just how different even neighborhoods within the area are,
Yeah.
but how so many people buy a house and it's like it's their forever home and they'll live there 30, 40, 50 years. And that's great for them. For us, we're in our fourth home already and we're probably going to have another one. And to me, that has helped compartmentalize my life into segments so that all doesn't
Mm,
run together. It's like, oh, those were the years we lived in this house and those were
that's
the years we lived
interesting.
in this house. I really like that, as hard and annoying as moving is, you know? But you and I were having this conversation that I love something that you say often is like, don't live the same year every year and call it a life. Like,
Mm.
make each one different. And so I like that I can look back and say, oh, in 2020, we moved to Arizona. In 23, I ran a marathon. In 24, I decided to learn to bake sourdough. And that's become like a fun part of my life. It's just little things like that that
Yeah.
stack on top of each other to create the person that you're going to be. But you can look back and be like, ooh, that was different. That was different. It's like, what's a new skill you can learn or a new place you can go? There's so many different things that you can do to mix things up.
And I think that Jesse Eitzler has a really good. He's got his big A calendar,
Mhm.
which I think
Right.
many of our team have, and it really is looking at your year in one, like literally in one view. And he's got color coded. I don't know what you'd call those, like post-it notes, kind
No
of.
post-its, yeah.
Yeah. So where you can plan your year out and visually see it. And Mandy and I did this last year, and we actually just did a recap of our year, and we probably hit 70% of what we put on there.
Mm,
Um, but he talks about a misogi, which, if anyone hasn't read the book Comfort Crisis, I think we've talked about it on this
mhm,
podcast before, but highly, highly recommend that book. And the author brings up this concept of the misogi, and it's basically an adventure that you have about a 50% chance of completing.
mm.
That's kind of the goal going in. It's like, it's not like a sure thing. I'm going to go do this thing. It's, I think I can do this if I work really hard. I think his rules were you couldn't die as a result of failing. And I feel like there was something else too. Um, but I think those kinds of things, those defining moments, and I think that's something we should, Kenny, if you can link in the comments, link to Jesse Eitzler's, I think it's kind of 11 or 12-minute video for
Mhm.
2026 for how to plan your year properly. I highly recommend you go check that out. I think it's revolutionary. But I think, to your point, Erin, and you've done a really good job of like kind of selecting your word for the year and filtering things through that. I think more of us could do a good job of doing that. Select something that your year is filtered through. So maybe it's a year of connection with your kids. Maybe you have kids that you're like, I just don't feel like I have the closest relationship. I don't have the ideal relationship with them. Great. Filter everything through. Does that enhance or does that detract from that relationship? So, I mean, we talk a lot about 510: spiritual, family, business, financial, fitness. In each of those areas, I think it's very easy to select something and say, here's what is going to define this year
Mhm.
around that thing. And that kind of becomes your goals or the rocks for the year that you want to hit.
I love choosing a word for the year, because I think it puts the focus on what I need most in my life right now. And I'm a believer, and I feel like I'm given the word at this point. It's like 8 years running that I
Mm,
picked the word. But like if it's an area you specifically, like you just said, need work in or struggle with, that's your word. Like for me, 1 year was discipline. Like I need to be more disciplined in my fitness. 1 year, it was stewardship. It was more about financial stewardship. Um, Power, worthy. This year, expand. Ooh, it feels good this year, but I love picking a word. And another thing that I have brought to these last 5 10s of the year with my members, we go through the 5 areas for the year, but then the last question, we talk a lot about reverse engineering what you want. And so I say, you and I are having this conversation 1 year from now. You tell me 2026 was one of the best years of my life. What will have happened? And it's really cool to see their wheels start turning and then say, okay, this has happened, this has happened, this has happened. And then I put it on a PDF that I send to them that they can use as a visual reminder. And I'm really excited to revisit those at the end of the year, because when you write out your goals, when you speak out your goals, when you have that vision, you're so much more likely to achieve them. So think about, we get to the end of this year, what will have happened to make this year different and even better than years prior?
Yeah. And this is a great thing to do. Again, for those of us who have a spouse or a partner, it is critical that you do these things together. It's like aligning. Yes, your ships are aligned and hopefully sailing in the same direction together, but it's easy to drift, I think, in life. And as you go through different phases, how are you being intentional? This is one of those ways, like get on this. It's early January. Go on a date together, set aside some time, grab some coffee and sit in the room together and just dream. What do we want this year to look like? And I think, I'm a big believer in like New Year's resolutions and all those kinds of things. I know there are a lot of people who don't like them, but it's better to have a plan, like go into a situation with a plan and have to change it than to not go into it with anything at all. And so I think, creating these things, like give yourself some vision for where you want to go, and then invite in accountability to then accomplish those things to get there. I think that's probably the missing piece, and why my heart beats with coaching and accountability is it's just this marker in time. As Erin, you talk about your 5 10s coaching with your members, every month you're sitting down with them, you are a marker in time. And although you can't actually hold them accountable, as I like to say, there's no Uncle Giuseppe going to come bust your kneecaps if you don't do what you said you were going to do, but you can hold space for people to give account. And so I would just invite anyone who's listening, don't be afraid to set those goals, those audacious goals that you would like to move towards, and then invite accountability into your life to be a marker in time that says, okay, how am I progressing? And it's okay to show up to a coaching call and just be like, I didn't do anything. It totally slipped my mind. But better to do that after 30 days than 30 years.
Yeah.
So I just think this is all about intentionality and accountability. And if you can bring those two things together, I think it's just shocking what people can accomplish when we set our mind to it.
I agree. So we already know the year is going to go by quickly, but let's do what we can to slow it down.
Do new things,
make new memories, create those new pathways, and we can't wait to hear how it goes. So thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to talking to you again. And until then, go be a wealth maverick.